Hey, Joe Zach here, giving you a sneak preview of a talk that I did at the Elasticsearch developer meetup in San Diego, virtual of course, and I wanted to share it for you on YouTube. So the talk is about easy local development with Elastic Cloud on Kubernetes. And I'm going to be using a tool that I really like called Scaffold to put it together. So the reason that I want to do this talk is because I think it's really important to have a dev and production environment that are in sync. The closer you can have these two things, the better. You can avoid mistakes and life is just easier. And then when it comes time to debug production, then you're already familiar with it. That's hard for really complex systems, like, for example, Elasticsearch, where you might have several different services involved, different kinds of nodes, different types of environments. And so what happens is a lot of times organizations will set up like a shared server somewhere that all the developers can use. And I'm just going to pretend we have a team of 20 developers. And so you may have one developer that sets up and maintains this environment that the other 19 use. And, that works out okay. But what if some developers are working on features that are going to roll out in a couple months? And part of that includes a newer version of Elasticsearch or some other services. Or what if you've got developers working on a fix that requires an older version? Well, then you need people to set up additional environments, and that kind of stinks. Also, sometimes developers make mistakes and do things like, wipe out all the data. And if anyone needs to do any sort of maintenance on one of these systems, then they're going to take it down and break things for all the developers. Are going to have a period where they're not going to be able to do their day jobs. And that's a problem. Also, that environment is often out of sync with production. Like I mentioned, if you're trying to work on some new features that require a new version of Elasticsearch that you're going to roll out in production, there's going to be a period where your dev environments are ahead of your production environments, which is problematic. And so, yeah, it's complicated. And it doesn't have to be. And so what I want to show you today is a tool from Google called Scaffold that you can use to run Kubernetes locally. And it makes it easy to do that. And then you can use Scaffold to actually deploy out to your environments. So you can use basically one file to determine your architecture that you use in both dev and production, keeping everything in sync, which is really great. So the tools involved here, we've got Elastic. This is for an Elastic meetup, so it's going to be focused on that heavily. We're going to be running things on Kubernetes. That's kind of the backbone here. And the tool that we're using to keep these things all running together and running well together is Scaffold, which is an open source tool from Google that is the glue here. All right, and now I'm going to do a little demonstration where I'm going to create a scaffold.yaml file, which is a special file that the tool I mentioned earlier, Scaffold, can use in order to spin up an architecture. And it's got a bunch of really nice stuff built in that I'm going to give you a tour of. So I'm not going to go too deep into Elasticsearch or the Elastic Cloud on Kubernetes tool or Kubernetes because I just kind of want to keep things light and show you what's possible. But the source code for this presentation is available. And unlike a lot of other presentations or demonstrations you might see for stuff, this can serve as a suitable bedrock here. So everything that I'm going to show you is not like kind of illusory smoke and mirrors demo type stuff. This is like a real foundation that you can use to go and kind of start building your dev workflow and even production build deployments off of, which I think is really exciting. So let's go ahead and just do this thing from scratch. Don't worry, I got some notes as a backup in case I end up down a rabbit hole, which I'm prone to do. So if you're not familiar with Kubernetes, you'll see that I'm going to be kind of typing in some weird nonsensical boilerplate here. And if you are familiar with Kubernetes, and you know this is the kind of stuff that you end up doing with pretty much everything that you do in Kubernetes. So this is very consistent with Kubernetes type stuff. I'm just creating a file here, and we don't have anything in it yet. So let's make sure I have a blank cluster. So this is a tool that I like. You're going to be seeing this a lot today. That makes for really great presentations. It's basically a UI for Kubernetes. And what we're seeing right now is that I'm hooked up to a local cluster running inside of Docker. I'm in the default namespace, and I'm looking at pods, which you can think of as being processes running in Kubernetes. So this kind of maps to things like an Elasticsearch node, for example, or an instance of Kibana. And we'll see those things popping up here in a minute. Now, we don't have any artifacts to build, so I don't have any custom Docker files or anything like that. We're just going to be working with the Elastic Cloud on Kubernetes to keep things simple so we can kind of focus on the meat here. So I'm going to deploy, and there's multiple options here. Helm is probably the most common thing you'll see if you're doing any like real work with Kubernetes. There's customize, there's, I want to say Kaneko or something. Several different options for things you can deploy. And let's go ahead and get the documentation up here. It's really nice. And let's see, references, scaffold.yaml. So everything you're going to see me typing is all just straight out of here. Like I'm going to be filling in different options and different things that I need in order to do what I want to do given this single file reference. And I should mention too, or just reiterate that Scaffold is an open source tool from Google. It's cross-platform, so I'm going to be running it on Windows. I installed it with Chocolatey. If you're on OS X, you can install it with Brew. The only trick is Scaffold with a K, as you know, Kubernetes. Back to the matter at hand. So I'm going to be installing Manifest. Now, I mentioned ECK a few times. If you're not familiar, ECK is Elastic Cloud on Kubernetes. It's basically a set of custom resource definitions and an operator for Elasticsearch. And those are definitely kind of heavy Kubernetes topics. But all you need to know for this talk is that they make running Elasticsearch super easy in Kubernetes. So let's just straight up Google for this. Elastic ECK. If we go to the quick start guide and then deploy ECK in your cluster, there's a URL here that contains everything you need to set up ECK. I'm just going to pop that in there. And what I'm telling Scaffold to do here is that I'm telling it that I want it to deploy via kubectl the files in this array. And there's only one item now. That's what this little dash means. It's an item in a list or an array. We're going to install this. So I'll come over here, say scaffold run, and it's going to do that if I typed it correctly. And I did not. I put the file in the wrong spot. So I'm going to move this up a level. And we're live coding here. I should apologize in advance. Try this again. There we go. So there is a list of all the things that this operator, or this ECK just installed, which does include an operator, which is responsible for kind of managing my clusters. You can kind of think of it as like someone on your team that will set this stuff up for you after you tell it what to do. And that's their custom resource definitions that kind of create some abstractions around the things that we want to do and just makes it just dead simple. At least as simple as Kubernetes can be. So that's pretty cool. Let's go and actually deploy an Elasticsearch cluster now. So I'm just going to grab this file out of here, the contents here, and we're going to deploy an instance of an Elasticsearch, which is an ECK concept. It's got a name of quick start. It's got a version, and it's going to have one node. Now, ECK is what Elastic Cloud actually runs in the background. It's capable of doing pretty much anything you would want to do with Elasticsearch. So you can have master nodes and ingest nodes, and to find the storage and the storage classes, RAM, limits, request, all sorts of stuff behind the scenes. But we're just going to keep it simple so we don't get bogged down in those details. Now, I have already downloaded this just in case the website was down or something, but I'm going to go ahead and just paste over. It looks like they upgraded the version on me. So let's do that, and let's go ahead and grab Kibana as well. And normally, or at least if you were working through like a getting started kind of guide, or if you're working through the Elastic article I mentioned, you're going to be deploying this stuff by hand by typing kubectl apply -f /dev/ maybe star, and deploy those files. And then if you want to remove them, then you're going to have to do some other stuff, and you're going to have to kind of know how to unwind that. Now Scaffold handles that for us. So I'm just going to do scaffold run again. This time I'm going to add my folder for Kate's dev / star. So now it's going to make sure that it's got the custom resources installed, and it does. And then it went and added my additional stuff. You can probably see appear at the top. Okay, installed Elastic and Kibana. So if we come over here, I don't see any pods yet. Now this is pulling in the background, but it could still be coming up. So let's go check on a custom resource type of Elasticsearch. Remember that was the type that we had in the file. So we've got one coming up. It's got unknown health because it's still just getting started. See, it's got a phase of applying changes. So things are going well. It's just going to take a second. And there we go. So it's not ready yet. See this 0 out of 1. Means we have one node for Elasticsearch, one node for Kibana, and that's going to take a minute to actually be usable. Or right now, Elasticsearch is already available. View the logs for that, make sure it looks okay. Any errors? Nope. All right, good. And now Kibana is up as well. So now we can go check this out, make sure it's working. First, I need to look up the password, and this is an ECK thing. They will generate a password for you by default, and you don't have to. Do that. You can use a hard-coded one if you want. But again, I'm just kind of trying to keep things simple. So we come over here to localhost, and let's come out of port 5601. Oh no, it doesn't seem to be working. And that's because there's one last thing I need to do. And that's, I need to port forward. We'll see how to make this easier in a second. So I'm going to go to Kibana. And in my case, this is you could type a kubectl command here to do this, but this UI, I'm just going to hit Shift F. And I'm going to hook it up so that on my local computer, 5601 is pointing into this cluster and hooking up to Kibana on port 5601. And the deal here is just that Kubernetes maintains its own DNS. It's kind of like a cloud in a box in some ways. And now I've kind of tunneled into that box. And we click past the warnings because we're running under HTTPS. And if you want to run this in your organization, you're going to hook up some certificates and stuff in order to get rid of that warning. Oh, and I lost my password. Let's go get that one more time. All right. Okay, and we'll go to our data tools and see what we got. All right, we got a couple indexes. Nothing exciting. We've got a couple documents from just kind of built-in type stuff, but not very exciting. We'll fix that here in a few minutes. But first, I want to kind of underline that what I'm trying to get across here is not, hey, look, you could set this up in 2 seconds and then you would never take this to production. And there's a whole lot of stuff you have to do on top of it. It's the point here is really to show you this kind of workflow. So what I'm trying to get across is that we can take this file and keep iterating on it to make life easier for every developer on our team. So now every developer who has this file checked in and is using Kubernetes locally has the ability to spin up the same architecture as you with a one-liner. And they can shut it down with a one-liner. So we got that. That looks good. What if we wanted to make our life easier? Let's look at Scaffold Dev real quick. Scaffold Dev gives us a way to watch for changes that's really nice when you're developing. And what that means is that, much like run, it's going to do its thing. It's going to set you all up. But over here now, if I come in and change a value, like say set the number of nodes for my Elasticsearch cluster up to 3, it noticed that I made a change in one of my files, and now it's out deploying it. So if we come back to our cluster, then we can see that we're going to get 2 more nodes spun up, which is really easy. But that isn't fantastic for everybody, right? Sometimes if I'm working locally, I don't want to use so many resources, so I'd rather just have like a single node maybe. Or maybe I need to run a different version than you, and so I want to be able to do that stuff a little bit more dynamically. And you don't want people going in and tweaking this file that everybody's sharing, right? That's just bad news. So what we can do instead is set up profiles. The way I'm going to, let me go ahead and bring that back down to 1, and then go ahead and stop this. Profiles are good for setting up some modularity in your environment. So profiles give you a way to optionally spin up various pieces. And not only is it kind of bolting on pieces, it can also modify or delete pieces of your architecture that you've got defined. This is not the right file. That you've got defined over here. So in our case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add dynamically an entry to this manifests section here. So we'll say profile. I think it's got an S on it. There's a good chance I'll mess this up. Name, and tell you what, I'm not even going to try and remember this. Let's grab this from our notes. And this is all up on GitHub, by the way. Profiles. Okay. Profiles. And let's go ahead and add Filebeat, sure. So name is Filebeat. This is going to be what me, the human, types in order to tell it to use this. And I'm telling it to add the files located here to deploy kubectl manifests in this file. So again, that's deploy kubectl manifest, and you can see it here. Deploy kubectl manifests. What that means is that anything you set in this path, you can actually change dynamically. So for some crazy reason, you wanted to change the API version, you could probably do that. You would just want to change just to a replace. If you wanted to add, for example, a Helm deploy here, in addition to your kubectl, then you would say add path is deploy, value is Helm, and then you would pop in your Helm stuff here. So let me just show you what this looks like, and this Filebeat here that I've already got on disk, I'm going to go ahead and upgrade it to 2. This is just another file where like I literally Googled like, you know, Elastic ECK Filebeat. And there we go. Just standard Kubernetes stuff. What the heck? We'll just go ahead and paste it in here. So now we got Scaffold, we got a profile named Filebeat. And the way you do this is you can do Scaffold, run, or dev, or there's actually several commands here. We're not even going to look at all of them today, not by a long shot. And then we pass a P or a -- profile, and we can do Filebeat. All right. So now if we come back over here, we should see Filebeat coming up, and it's already ready. And the way that Filebeat works here is it creates another Kubernetes concept called a daemon set, which is something that can communicate with like the node, the actual like hardware underneath, and it'll do things like you know, get Filebeat stuff out of there. So now if we come back to our Kibana and run get cat indices, now we should see something for Filebeat in here. I don't yet, so let's check the logs. Do see an error. Failed to connect to Elastic unauthorized. Uh-oh. Security exception. Uh-oh. All right, tell you what. Maybe we'll just take this whole thing down. Or maybe we just wait. Okay, hey, good thing we waited. I got a little nervous there that things were going to go down a weird path, but it looks like I just needed to be patient. Took a little while to figure things out, and so now we've got an index. Whew, who was worried? I wasn't worried. Name Filebeat, yada, yada, yada. Filebeat star, and we'll just search it and see we get some events. Underscore count. So we've got 2959. If I wait a little bit and refresh, 2964. So that's slowly going up. And so that's a way that you might, for example, give some developers a way to dynamically choose what they want. So maybe a normal use case, you don't want to have data flowing. In some cases you do. Another use case for something like this is you might want to say name, I'll call prod. And patches, we'll do an operation. This time we'll do a replace. Oops, do a replace. Path is deploy kubectl manifests. And what I'm saying is I'm going to replace what we've gotten here with values over here. And I think I've already got this set up. Yeah, I've got a prod folder here with some items. And I'm just going to do that thing where I copy the files over because the versions are slightly different. So here for prod, this is just a kind of example type of thing you could do. I'll say we want 5 nodes. Now there's easier ways to do variables and there's better ways to do variables for sure. But I just want to show you, demonstrate that you can mix and match these profiles. So now over here, let's go ahead and do a scaffold delete. So that's going to delete everything. Oh, did I give something up? Marshall error. Let's try getting rid of that profile. Looks like I had some sort of syntax error there. So I just destroyed our cluster, which is also pretty nice to be able to do that easily. If you are working with a team of developers, you wouldn't want to do that and mess everybody else up. And so, to make sure I typed this right. Oh, look, I typed open here. That's why it didn't work. So now I am going to say that I want to scaffold run. Oh, if I'm going to replace that, means I also need to add this manifest back. And this was actually prod/star. Scaffold run. Profile is prod and Filebeat. It's going to run both of these. Let's see if this works. And it didn't like this. In the interest of moving this along, I think there's something I'm maybe doing wrong here. Is it it's like trying to create the items later in the array. I don't know. We'll take that offline. That's a problem I saw the other day, and I thought I had fixed it. All right. We do a scaffold run. Sorry for cheating. Prod and Filebeat. All right, now that worked. So if we do take a look-see over here at our pods, it's going to take a little bit to come up. You should see that basically several nodes end up spinning up. We can also do what we did last time and watch this over here on Elasticsearch. Quick start created. I do something wrong? All right, well. Let's take a look at the docs here. Maybe we can figure this out. This will be under Scaffold profile. There we go. And there's a thing called op. You can do all sorts of fancy cool stuff like introspecting the type of environment in order to automatically figure out what kind of profiles to use. There's all sorts of different operations like building and testing and deploying. And Scaffold does have stuff built in for testing, which is really nice. You can override via patches. So here they've got a name. The op is replace. And they're replacing build artifacts, the first item. Okay. Let's try that. What could go wrong? So I think this is where I done goofed up. So I'm saying replace kubectl manifests the first item. So I'm replacing this with this. Cannot unmarshal a sequence to a string. That's because it should just be a straight up value here, not an array. Okay. Well, hey, good thing this hopefully worked on game day. I'm actually recording this before the talk, but it'll be published after the talk. So now we've hit something that is good to hit ahead of time. You know what I'm saying? All right. Did this work like we expected? Doesn't look like it. Manifest /1. Try just doing prod. Invalid path. Keep alt tabbing, sorry. Habit. Okay. So it did our normal stuff. And it looks like it did our Elasticsearch and our Kubernetes. Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh, you know what it is? On Windows, you have to put quotes around it. So this is a total user error. What do you know? So now if we do prod and Filebeat, we should see that same list of stuff, and now also including Filebeat. So what I had here was probably fine. All right, and so now it saw that Filebeat was the only thing that was missing here. So, woo! All right, no take-backsies though. We're gonna leave that in the video, so you can. That's how you know this is legit. So this used our prod profile, and so the point of me showing you that was just to demonstrate that you can kind of slice and dice and mix and match and replace things, add, delete, and modify your type of environments. And so that's really good for having things like I use prod as an example here. We could use that to deploy to a prod-like environment, and then Filebeat for like optional type work. I think I did set up an additional thing here, which I don't know if I'm going to get to this on the presentation that already happened. But we also have the ability to do Helm here, and so I just wanted to kind of show what that looked like real quick. So if we do Helm, and then I think it's releases, and then you need a name for the chart, in which case I'm going to do website here, and the chart path is the directory. So we've got it up here, so it's in charts/website. And here we've got a template that's going to set up a custom website. And so my point here was just to kind of to reiterate and show that you can use other tools besides just Helm. So do a scaffold run. And it should deploy my website now. This does include Helm. It means you have to have Helm installed on your computer, which is a really common tool used with Kubernetes. And that's probably more likely how you would do things like that. The prod example I set up where you'd want to use like different variables to pass the same files in order to set things like the number of replicas or whatever. But just kind of want to demonstrate how like maybe a custom website would work here. And if you had any custom images you need to use for Docker instead of using, for example, let's see, where am I getting my image from? So this image comes from here. Okay. So, glad we looked. Gone off the rails again. This is a custom Docker file that we wrote here. So that does mean that I have to add a build section here. And this is really easy. I don't have it memorized though. So let's go back over here to the documentation and see what kinds of stuff we would have to pop in for the build. Really glad to be recording this video now because I see that I'm going to have to cut some stuff. Because if I run into any problems, I'm going to go over time. I'm aiming for 35 minutes. So build, next up is artifacts. Then we do image and context. Everything else had defaults. So build artifacts. It's an array. It's got an image, which was website, right? And I'm fine with that name. And the context is going to be where I have that Docker file living, which is charts slash website. Yep, and it's right there. So now check this out. This is never going to finish. It's constantly waiting for website to be available. Now we can do Scaffold Build, and it will go off and build all of our artifacts. Now we only have one. And there is one catch here. There's something special you have to do for Helm, and it's because of this generated tag right here. Every time we do a build, we're going to retag and get a new version of this container. And this would be something that normally your build server would go out and publish to like a container registry, and then that would kind of set you up for your deploy. So the way this works is that I need to tell it about my images. And is that right? I think it is actually. Let me double check my notes. But what I'm saying here is basically there's an artifact in a variable over here. There's an image named website. And I need to tell it about this so it can override this variable, something you can do in Helm, in order to tack this this hash on at the end. And the value before the hash is website. So I think that's it. Just going to check my notes real quick to make sure. Website, charts website, Lisa's name, charts website, image overrides. It's actually the left-hand value should be image, which is the name of the variable, not the value of the variable. Okay. So let's try a scaffold run. We should get our environment showing up. We should get a new pod coming up any second. Oh, I'm filtering for Elasticsearch here. Take that off, and we can see it. So the point with that was just kind of show that you can work with Helm, and also if I were to do a Scaffold Dev, which means it's watching for changes, then I can do stuff like, actually, let's do one more. Dev, I'm going to go ahead and tell it to port forward for me, which is another option, which remember we port forwarded into Kibana. This will just automatically go ahead and set that up for anything that Scaffold knows how to see. And this is red because it had some sort of race condition, but this will actually end up getting hooked up here in a minute if we give it long enough. But we can see that it hooked up port 80. So if I go over here, we should be able to see port 80, hem 80. And hey, oh, we got some sort of problem with this Docker image. So if we come over here and take a look at our HTML file, we're missing some stuff. It just starts straight up with CSS. So we need to fix this up. We can do that by making HTML, and then we need to start a head, and then there's going to be a style tag. And then I think that'll do it. So now I save that. So Scaffold, because it's watching, is going to go off and rebuild that and redeploy. And if I keep refreshing long enough, hey, it's fixed. And so you can kind of imagine how developers could actually use this for a development tool. So if they need to make quick changes, then this is a way they can do that by just running that one command, setting up whatever profiles they want, getting their port forwarding. That's basically everything that I wanted out of Docker Compose. If you're familiar with that, it's another tool for kind of spinning up architectures. Except the big benefit of using Scaffold over something like Docker Compose is that I can use this Scaffold file to actually do my builds and deployments on my build server. Now I can tell that I went way over time, so I'm probably going to go and tweak this talk a little bit. So I'm not going to go into some of the things that I had originally planned on, because now I can tell that it's probably going to be too much. But if you leave a comment on this video and let me know what you would have liked to see, or if you have any feedback for me, that would be great for whatever next version I do of this talk later this year or next year. But the way you would do this, just kind of conceptually, is you would come in here and say Scaffold Build, and that is going to go out, build, and tag my website. And if you look at the help for build, you can see that it's got a ton of options for doing things like specifying your tags. There's also ways to set up different profiles and different ways of hooking up to different container registries, so that after you build, you can do a publish. And actually, if we look at just scaffold-help, you can see that we only looked at like run and dev. Debug gives you a way to actually hook up debuggers by setting up special ports and kind of tunneling things up, so you can do things like step through in a debugger in like Node or C#, for example. Python specific, or pipeline specific things that I'm kind of mentioning now is like build for publishing and building artifacts, deploy for deploying pre-built artifacts. That means you've already done a build and now you want to deploy those things. So build and deploy, these two steps are basically the same thing as run, which we've been running throughout. So if you want to have those as a single step for some reason, that's a way you would want to do it. But typically in bigger CI/CD environments, you're going to want to separate these things, because the stuff that you build might get deployed out to multiple environments and may get even promoted between various environments, between like a dev, staging, production, as various tests pass. We talked about delete. You can do render in order to just plain spit out the files that you need, that need to be applied if you want to use something else to apply. There's a couple nice things for kind of updating or getting started with a new project. We typed everything by hand, but if you've already got like a Docker Compose file or a Kubernetes infrastructure, you can just use init. And they've got some other kind of random stuff that's pretty nice. Again, we mentioned for version, or if you want to take a survey, they've got that built in. That's cool. So, aside from that, I'm definitely chopping off a little bit of the talk that I planned on going to, but I think that's okay. Maybe we just take a quick Google over here and we can kind of see what that looks like for setting up the container registry. And I think you can configure repositories and then pass it. And then what's kind of important about that is that when you tag these images, this might be getting too meta, but when you tag images like here, typically you're going to want the registry name in here. So it would be like, I don't know, dockerhub.com / v1.whatever / staging. It'll have some sort of prefix on it. And that's what setting up the repo will allow you to do. So you don't have to have that stuff in your developer spaces. In fact, you can configure it only on the build service if you want to keep that stuff private, which is a good idea. And so what you would do is basically just install Skaffold on the build server and have it do your Skaffold build and deploy. So with that, let's go ahead and call it. Didn't exactly go as I planned, but wasn't too far off. So let me know what you think of this talk. I'm always looking for feedback and always trying to make things better. And always trying to keep things, kind of real by leaving those mistakes in. So, let me know if you hate that too. All right, and have a good one.